Welcome back, all you bulls and bears and betas out there. Within the buzz of this Proxyopoly spin-off we call the Proxyopoly Podcast. In this Burn and Turn Out series of this Proxyopoly spin-off we call the Proxyopoly Podcast, we'll be diving in further to the turnout of this spin-off Proxyopoly, featuring Proxyopolist 1 and Proxyopolist 2. These guest Proxyopolists will be bringing you sponsored content and contributed content, brought to you by Proxyopoly of the Whole and its alternative forms. Now, without further delay, I'm joined today by NASCAR Cosa, the jackal of trading card games. How the hell y'all doing, Proxyopoly of the Whole and its alternative forms? I'm NASCAR Cosa, the jackal of trading card games, as major man by the jackal of trades in this Proxyopoly spin-off we call the Proxyopoly Podcast. And if you're joining us for the first time, this is once again the second of the back-to-back episodes of the Burn and Turn Out feature on the Proxyopoly Podcast. And this is again now episode number 32 in the entire Proxyopoly series, which develops the game of Proxyopoly Podcast as well. And if we would be telling you that the Proxyopoly score would be premiering this season on the Proxyopoly Podcast, well, it's gonna be a hell of a 7 episodes in total for this season of the Proxyopoly Podcast for you Proxyopolists at home. Today, however, on this episode of the Proxyopoly Podcast, we'll be featuring Proxyopolist 1 and Proxyopolist 2. Now, these Proxyopolists will be joining us on the podcast to bring the Proxyopoly sponsored content and contributed content. Now, this proxy content underlying the Proxyopoly system would be protected under the trademark of Proxyopoly, brought to you by
we are the shackles of the General Potter Lodge. We have a proxy problem for you. Proxy 0 has a Proxyopoly scores. Proxy 0 has all the Proxyopoly scores. Underlying this Proxyopoly system, what do you get is a Proxyopoly Podcast. We are the shackles of the General Potter. General Potter Lodge. Clang, 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 clang. You get the point, here's Proxy 0. You can live in Proxyopoly 2 if you contact Proxyopoly today on the Linktree at Linktree/NASCAR Cosa.
Greetings, Proxyopoly of the Whole and its alternative forms. I'm Proxy 0. Before we get into introductions, on this Proxyopoly spin-off we call the Proxyopoly Podcast. The Proxyopolist at home. A futile means to retrieve the Proxyopoly scores from my possession. I'm in custody. See, long ago in distant Proxyopoly, the name of Proxyopoly Podcast was the Proxyopoly Podcast in which there were fictitious Proxyopolies at hand, playing and discarding their Disney Proxy cards for games no more. See, unless any Proxyopolist at home has been out there taking the minutes of this Proxyopoly spin-off we call the Proxyopoly Podcast, then it may be my unfortunate circumstances to inform the Proxyopolist that it may be futile to retrieve the Proxyopoly scores from my possession. Once again, unless any Proxyopolist out there has been taking the minutes and noting them down in transcripts, then I couldn't possibly see a way how any listener out there could Alright,
Nature may the evidence necessary to supplement the burden of proof required to protect such things under a trademark.
And Washington is one. And I'll finish me
Any Proxyopolist at home have any of the minutes or transcripts from the previous meetings of any Proxyopoly out there? Fictitious or non-fictitious? Chance to play the game of Proxyopoly could be yours, Proxyopolist, by contacting Proxyopoly today on the Linktree at linktree/NASCARCosa. Or if you would like to send your money to Proxyopoly, select the Send Your Money to Proxyopoly option on the Linktree at linktree/NASCARCosa.
You see, this is the reason why I recused myself from the Game of Proxyopoly podcast in Season 4. Hi, I'm the Jackal of Trades, once again on the Proxyopoly podcast. And we'd like to thank Proxy Zero for that cold call from the inner depths and machinations of this Proxyopoly system we call the Proxyopoly podcast. Now, coming at you live from the streets of Proxyopoly, joined by NASCARCosa, the Jackal of Trading Card Games. We're going to make light of Proxy Zero's previous statements that Proxyopolis attempts may be futile to retrieve the Proxyopoly scores from Proxy Zero's possession, custody. However, these proxy variables for non-financial performance are not indicative of future returns. And mock investments do involve mock risks. All these things being said and duly noted for the minutes. NASCARCosa, will you please present the transcripts from the previous meetings of the Proxyopoly, which can be found on Apple Podcasts, another place where you can get your Proxyopoly podcasts. I'm the Jackal of Trades, here to present the transcripts and the minutes from previous episodes of Proxyopoly podcasts. Is NASCARCosa, the Jackal of Trading Card Games.
I'd like to announce my candidacy for Shreveport Mortician. The Jackal 2020. I'll shit in your open mouth.
Thank you, Jackal of Trades. Hi, I'm NASCARCosa, the Jackal of Trading Card Games again. Here to read the minutes from the previous meetings of the Proxyopoly. Dissolution of an unincorporated Proxyopoly. Whereas in the case of an unincorporated Proxyopoly TM, it may sometimes happen over a period of time that the needs which led to the formation of a Proxyopoly TM have largely disappeared, and Proxyopoly TM of the whole and its alternative forms may prepare a resolution to motion dissolution of a Proxyopoly TM to be selected by a Proxyopolist on their turn. Provided that the general partner at large of the selected Proxyopoly TM have been discharged. Such a resolution to motion dissolution may be coupled with other resolutions stating that the manner in which the dissolving Proxyopoly TM shall dispose its assets and discard mock proxies to be distributed amongst Proxyopolists at Proxyopoly TM of the whole and its alternative forms. The resolution to motion dissolution is in effect a motion to...
Drang, drang! We are the shackles of the general partner at large. Drang, drang! Here to remind the Proxyopolist at home that you can submit your proxy content to be featured as sponsored content or contributed content today by selecting the Contact Proxyopoly option on the Linktree at linktree/NASCARCosa. Additional prospectuses and supplemental information required. Please select Contact Proxyopoly option today only if you are fully fluent and aware of all the circumstances underlying the Proxyopoly podcast. Proxyopoly podcast is protected under the trademark of Proxyopoly. Any supplemental information can be found in the Patreon description and information available required. Self-assembly featured. And going back to the cold calls, we have additional reading materials from Proxyopolist roaming the Proxyopoly out there in the streets of Proxyopoly. Up next we have Proxyopolist 1. Thrang.
Hi, I'm Proxyopolist 1. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Proxyopolist. I'm just gonna talk about whatever it is I want to talk about on the Proxyopoly podcast. I'm Proxyopolist 1, and I can talk about whatever it is I want to talk about on the Game of Proxyopoly podcast. Because I've sent my money to Proxyopoly, and I'm therefore going to have sponsored content on the Proxyopoly podcast. I'd like to now present my sponsored content on the Proxyopoly podcast. This proxy content may also be referred to as sponsored content on the Proxyopoly podcast. Please refrain from asking questions on the Proxyopoly podcast while Proxyopolist 1 has the floor, Proxyopolist. I'm Proxyopolist 1, Proxyopolist. This message has been brought to you by Proxyopolist 1, Proxyopolist. I do a lot of other things other than being Proxyopolist 1, though, Proxyopolist. I'm Proxyopolist 1. This concludes my proxy content as sponsored content on the Proxyopoly podcast, Proxyopolist. I'm Proxyopolist 1, Proxyopolist.
Thank you to Proxyopolist 1. This episode's sponsored content is once again brought to you by Proxyopolist 1. You can get your Proxyopolist 1 wherever you get your Proxyopoly podcasts. I'm the Jackal of Trades, and looking down this cold call list for this episode of the Proxyopoly podcast we call The Turnout, after the burnout, after the spin out, after the spin-off, that is the podcast, the Proxyopoly podcast. Anyway, we're moving on in a different pentameter anyway. Moving on to the paid programming and contributed content of Proxyopoly, whereby Proxyopolist may join the podcast to deliberate the absurdist corporate buzzwords from the Game of Proxyopoly podcast, or to uncover further clues as to the whereabouts of the Proxyopoly scores on the Proxyopoly podcast in the custody of Proxy Zero. Bearing in mind all these things may just be proxy variables for non-financial performance. That's right, folks. If you are looking for proxy variables for non-financial performance, look no further. Because Proxyopoly has all of your proxy variable needs today on the Linktree at Linktree/NASCAR-COSA. Looking for additional contributed content to find out more information about how you can contribute your funds to the Kickstarter and crowdfunding efforts of this Proxyopoly. Check out the Proxyopoly podcast exclusive Patreon on the Linktree, where you can find all the prospectuses necessary to play the game of Proxyopoly based on an anti-logarithm of proxy variables for non-financial performance, otherwise known as blah blah blah. You get the point. Can we reach the funding goals of the Proxyopoly? That may be the game, folks. That's right. On a need-to-know basis, you're listening to it, we're launching more and more means to play the game of Proxyopoly, whether it's on the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding or the Patreon, or whether or not you just want to send your money to Proxyopoly. The choice is entirely yours, Proxyopolist. Now we have another Proxyopolist on the line, as mentioned earlier, who has additional information about the Proxyopoly scores on the line. This Proxyopoly system protected under the trademark of Proxyopoly. Now, without further delay, Proxyopolist 2.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Proxyopolist 2. Contributing proxy content on this spin-off we call the Proxyopoly podcast, to announce that there is a proxy contest for a new pilot for the Game of Proxyopoly podcast. And any Proxyopolist can submit their proxy content to the Proxyopoly by selecting the Contact Proxyopoly option today in the Linktree. And you can play along in this Proxyopoly system this way by not sending any money to Proxyopoly at all. Just send your proxy content to Proxyopoly today by selecting the Contact Proxyopoly option. Or if you would like to provide sponsored content like Proxyopolist 1 did prior to my entry on this podcast, I'm Proxyopolist 2, then you can just send your money to Proxyopoly and participate in the Proxyopoly by submitting sponsored content to the Proxyopoly, which can be read aloud. And you can talk about whatever it is you want to talk about on the sponsored content of the Proxyopoly. But if you would just like to actively participate in the building of Proxyopoly of the whole and its alternative forms into a robust and profound proxy advisor, then you can yourself be a part of the Proxyopoly system, have your own pilot. That's right, every Proxyopolist dream of a Proxyopoly pilot. Proxyopolist at home, will you take part in the proxy contest and submit your proxy content to be a part of the proxy pilot? Or will you cower like Proxy Zero with the Proxyopoly scores? The choice is yours, Proxyopoly. I'm Proxyopolist 2. Signing off on this contributed content brought to you by Proxyopoly. If it ain't Proxyopoly, you Proxyopoline.
Thank you, Proxyopolist 2, for the contribution of proxy content to this episode of the Proxyopoly podcast. Thus concludes the Burnout and the Turnout featured back-to-back series within the season of the Game of Proxyopoly podcast. And stay tuned, Proxyopolists, for the Proxyopoly score premieres this season on the Proxyopoly podcast. Now streaming for free wherever you get your Proxyopoly podcasts. Transcripts available on Apple Podcasts. Q&A features available on Spotify. Accessible and shareable on YouTube. And a friendly reminder to the Proxyopolist at home to like and subscribe wherever you get your Proxyopoly podcasts. And don't forget about the socials. Follow today on Instagram at Proxyopoly. And don't forget to check out the exclusive proxy content available to exclusive subscribers on the Patreon at Proxyopoly. That's it for now, Proxyopolists. I'm the Jackal of Trades. Stay tuned for the proxy contest to submit your own pilot to the Game of Proxyopoly podcast and potentially win your own Proxyopoly podcast. I'm the Jackal of Trades. And if it ain't Proxyopoly, you're Proxyopoline.